Welcome back to Mac's Garage. As always, hit the like, share, subscribe. It helps me out. I appreciate that. So today I'm going to continue disassembly of the 352 Ford FE. This is a 1965 engine. When I started this, I was under the assumption that nobody had ever been into this engine at all before, and as I go through it, I am pretty convinced somebody has been through most of the engine, if not the whole thing. So in this video, I have not removed the cam yet, which is probably a little bit out of order for this kind of engine or this type of scenario, but it's going to work okay. There's kind of a reason why I'm doing that, and that's because the lifters don't really seem to want to come out. So I'm going to pull the rotating assembly first, and then there's a real good chance I'm going to have to actually drive the lifters down through the block, which will be super fun. But that's where we're at. A lot of important stuff in this video. So if you're taking any engine apart, there's a lot of things that are going to be really important as far as disassembly goes. And I'll start off with probably the most important thing about engine building that you will screw up if you don't know it. As engines are built, they are assembled and then machined. Well, I guess it's kind of a little bit different. In the old days like this, they were machined, assembled, and then machined again. Now today, some of the parts are machined, cracked in half, and then used that way. In either case, it is incredibly important that all of these parts get matched up. So you've got your main caps here. We've got 5 of them. Very important that they go back in the same place, facing the same direction. On this engine, we have 8 rod caps. Very important that they go back with their matched partner and in the same direction. I had to walk away from this, so hopefully I'm picking up in the right spot. But all of these machining pieces, or all of these machined pieces, are very critical. One of the ways that I'm fairly confident somebody's at least had the pistons out is that these rods are already marked. So I'll pull you in here and show you that. Okay, so I'm not sure how well this is going to show up, but we've got a 5 on the top, a 5 on the bottom, and that's so you can keep track of where both sides of them are. Now this is where Ford is a little bit different, because this is here's the rod for the first, here's the first rod, here's the second rod. And this is why I have a video on firing order, and I say that Ford doesn't make sense. This is why. So if you go with a Chevrolet style numbering, you will have cylinder number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The way that Ford does it, we have cylinder number 1, 5, 2, 6, 3, 7, I lost track, 4, 8. So that is a little bit different. Now, along with those already being marked, I'm going to show you something else. And I'm not sure how well this is going to show up, but I have not taken anything apart on this bottom end yet. This is rod number 7. It should be. It's in the number 7 hole. The top here is kind of hard to read what it is, but it's an 8. Now if we go to cylinder number 8, the bottom part is 8, the top part is 7. So it is very important you don't mix these up, but those two clearly have been, and they've run for quite a while like that. So along with our normal machining, we're going to have to check the roundness of these 2 rods to make sure nothing's happened. My guess is that they're probably not terribly bad, but when we pull those bearings out, the bearings will look a little lopsided. Now with that said, because I don't have to mark these, I'll be able to just start taking pistons out. Now in the other video, I had these metal punches. That's how you make these marks. So what you would do, and I already marked some things with them, you would punch the rods top and bottom to help you line them back up. But we don't need them here because all the rods are already marked. Alright, hopefully the battery holds up on this thing. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling the timing chain off. I'm not going to take the cam out right now, but I'm just going to pull this off. This bolt, the single bolt on one of this style cam retainers is always on there pretty well. So I'm going to keep the eccentric for the fuel pump, and that's a little different. Yeah. So this stuff kind of slides forward, and there we are. Now I could pull this whole thing off of there, but we are going to replace it because this has a plastic gear in it, and those are always garbage. If you ever see one of these, throw it away, get metal. Now I'm ready to actually start pulling pistons. I've got the timing chain off. I could have done that later, but this just seemed like the right time to me to do it. So I took that off. As I pull these connecting rod caps, kind of the same thing we did with the other ones. We will crack them loose, maybe an eighth of a turn, and kind of go back and forth with them. And this is just kind of a reverse of torquing something. We want it to loosen up evenly so that it works properly. After these are backed off to where they're loose, we'll go ahead and this one's got some junk on the threads, and by junk I mean grime from 60-year-old engine oil. I mean, probably not 60-year-old, but you know, old engine oil. Okay, so sometimes, but not very often, you can just kind of grab those caps and they'll pop out of there. Other times you can grab a rubber mallet, kind of smack them a little bit. They do seat together with the rod bolts. And once it cracks loose a little bit, you can usually pop that out of there. And whoo-hoo, yeah, time for bearings. But check this out, there is still oil inside of this. This engine has not been run in a very long time, and there's still oil in the rod bearing areas. Set the rod off to the side. Now, as we take these out, you've got to be very careful not to damage the crankshaft. One of the ways we do that is just to take a piece of rubber hose. So just take some rubber line. They make rod protectors for this. I don't have them. Actually, I probably do somewhere. I don't know where they're at. I used to have slightly more engine building stuff than what it seems like I do at this point. So as you go to push this down, you can probably just take the piston and slide it for the first little bit. As you get to the bottom of the cylinder, you'll have what is called a ring ridge. So in the other video, I kind of showed you where that was at, and I showed you that this one has like a weird up and down motion to it, but that also means it doesn't have sharp edges. If you have one that has a deep sharp edge at the ring groove, you may not be able to get the pistons out very easily. You may need to actually cut that ridge off with a special cutting tool, or break the rings, or beat on some stuff, and it's just really not the best situation. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think this piston is very likely going to just come right out. So I'll take one hand to catch it. Ooh, it came part way out. Yep. And it's like right there. I think it feels like it's catching on probably the oil rings. If you need to take you can use the wooden or plastic end of a hammer and kind of give it some gentle persuasion. then it comes right out. Now you may have seen my 2-liter holder. So this was donated by a party store. So once this thing comes out, there's 2 different ways you can do it, because this engine is upside down right now. So cylinder number 1, oh, look at that. That ring is broken, and I don't think that's from pulling it. I think that ring just was actually broken. So definitely in need of some rings. Okay, so we'll take our rod protector back off. Make sure you do this while they're all together, or while you're doing them one at a time. We'll make sure that we've got our numbers lined up, rod cap to rod cap. So we got the 1 and the 1, I think. Where's it on the other side? Yeah, right there, 1 and 1. So we got that lined up. We'll just kind of gently set it back together. And this engine has floating pins, so there's a circlip there, and the pin actually, well, it seems to be pressed in this rod too. It's probably supposed to be a floating pin, and it's not quite anymore. So we'll put that back in there. Go on to cylinder number, in this case, 5. If it was a normal engine, not a Ford, this would be 2. Realistically, I'm going to speed this process up, so it'll be, I'll show it all, but it'll be real fast. So just the same thing on the next 7 pistons. I guess before I do that, maybe there's one other thing that I should mention. You'll notice that the rod throw is basically straight up and down here. This gives us basically the best access to both cylinders on this journal. So yeah, you want to do that as you go back too. So we'll actually rotate the crankshaft over as I go down through the different cylinders. No resistance. That ring was broken too. This video has gotten broken up a lot more than I really wanted it to, but that is what it is. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. So now I've got the rods and pistons out. The timing chain is off. It's time to start pulling the crankshaft. Now, I didn't really say this before, but I don't think the camera's going to pick it up. This crankshaft, just looking at it, it's going to need a minimum of a turn, a minimum of a polish, probably turned, because it's got some pretty good grooves. Yeah. So now we'll check it out and see what kind of condition this is in. And before I do that, I need to go get my dial indicator and check crankshaft end play. So that'll be first. Then we'll pull this out, kind of inspect the crank, and then we're going to start figuring out what this is going to take to rebuild. We're checking end play before we take this apart so we can kind of have an idea if there's going to be an issue. To check end play, I've got my dial indicator set up. I've got it up against a counterweight on the crankshaft, but basically any place that you set it up, from a good solid point on the block to a consistent point on the crankshaft, will work. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my crankshaft and pry back on it. When I pry back on it, I'm going to zero out my dial indicator. Now, when I go and pry forward, this crankshaft is actually going to slide forward a little bit, and they should. If they don't, you have a problem. So this one moved. If I'm prying on it, it can move up to 0.010 of an inch. If I pry back the other way, whoops, I just rotated it a little bit. That's fine. It pretty much stayed in the same place. So let me zero it one more time and we'll check it again. Yep, so we've got, I would say, 9.5 to 0.010 of movement back and forth out of this crankshaft. Normally I would write that down, but I just set it into a video so I don't have to. But record that before you take it apart. We'll take this dial indicator, set it off to the side, and then we're going to start pulling the main caps. But before I start pulling the main caps, I need to mark them. So on a lot of these, you will have arrows, and these are no exception. We've got an arrow that points forward on every one of these caps. However, that's kind of where the marking ends. And just like the rod caps, it really matters where these go back in. So we have, this one is clearly different. We're not going to have to actually mark that. That only goes in one spot, one direction. Pretty easy to figure out. These other four have some options. So we will get 1, 2, 3, 4 stamps out. And honestly, on these Ford caps, it's pretty easy. They gave you like a little, it's probably not what this is here for, but there's a nice little round thing that is like the perfect size to stamp. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to put some numbers on here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now we got these stamped. We're going to know where they go back into the engine at. Just like everything else we've taken off, we're going to take these off in stages. I don't know if these are a fine or a coarse thread bolt, so we'll go like 1/8 of a turn on loosening them. Now with all the bolts loose, you can do this a couple different ways. Sometimes you can just pull the bolts back a little bit and work the cap, like so. So that one came out. That's cap number 1. Set it off to the side. And honestly, these mains look a lot better than the rods. I wasn't really expecting that. Another thing you can do on bearings, and I did this on the rods off camera, and I think they're actually 10 under bearings already, is pull them out, and a lot of the times they will have information right on them. And looking at this one, I'm not sure if the other ones are 10 under or not. They've got some numbers that don't necessarily line up, but we'll go through with those, you know, in the next video probably. So take that one out. There are certain blocks that are a little bit more difficult to pull main caps off of. This is one of them. The reason being that this pan rail actually comes down and skirts up above the caps. If you look at, say, a small block Chevy or a small block Ford or a 385 series Ford, if we're still talking Ford, the pan rail would be much lower, and you can kind of smack them from the side with a dead blow and pop them up. A little bit harder to do on these that have the deep skirted. These are like this. Big block Chryslers are like this. Hemis are like this. Pretty much all of your new engines are like this. Your LS, modular Fords. You get the point. Alright, so anyway, I'm just going to kind of keep working at these. They're moving. They'll come out. They're just going to be a pain. Okay, so on this rear one, it's this style of block has a whole assembly that goes down in. So I'm going to slide a slide hammer. I bolted it onto the 2 bolts where it goes to the oil pan rail. We're going to tighten a slide hammer down on here, and it should come up fairly easy. Whoa, the slide hammer's moving. Hold on. Okay, so that came right out of there, no drama. So now we're ready to just simply lift the crank out. I'll pull this bearing off of there and put it back in the cap though. But yeah, we're more or less ready to lift the crankshaft out. And when you do that, you don't want to lay a crankshaft down unsupported. Theoretically, they can warp or bend when you do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up close against this wall area, and then I will use a bungee cord just to hold it upright so it doesn't fall over. But this should lift straight up out of there. Now we've got that out of there. What I'm going to do next is something that probably would have normally been done. That is pull the camshaft. And so this one has a cam retaining plate on it. I'm going to spin this around and get you to an angle. The reason I left this cam until basically the last thing to take out is because I think there's going to be some issues getting it out of here, because the lifters don't really want to drop out. So I'm going to now take this cam retaining plate off, which by the way is not super common on a flat tappet cam engine, but it is what it is. So we'll pull this out. Now, I just installed this bolt back in here. The cam actually doesn't really want to move. It doesn't want to spin. It does. There it goes. It spun. But it doesn't want to come out. So I think what I'm going to have to do is actually get down in and kind of pry the lifters away. Not a normal thing. Normally this is a lot easier process than what it's being. That shouldn't have been the case, and I can't move the camshaft either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pry bar, I'm going to get down in between the webbing and the lobe, and just kind of run it forward that way. Okay. And now I'm caught there. So this will be fun, but I'm probably going to slide hammer this cam out. Okay, so this is, again, not common at all, but I'm just going to try to, I don't really have the greatest adapter for this. That didn't work. Okay, so I had to slide hammer a cam out. I can't say I've ever had to do that before. I'm not sure exactly what was holding it up, but it wasn't great. Oh, good. Now we're into the next row. It's probably just a heavy coating of oil on the stuff, and I think I'm gonna actually have to slide hammer it through this as well. Run it out. So this is super tight going through all the journals, which is not great. Okay, so there is the camshaft now totally out. We're not going to reuse this one for a bunch of reasons, but there we go. Now we got to get the lifters out of here, and I don't really know what the best route of action for that is going to be. I guess probably to flip it over and drive them down through the bottom. I think that'll work. Alright, so normally when you're taking lifters out, you try to keep them lined up with where they came out of. We've already determined that these are going to be garbage, so we're not worried about that. So we're just going to knock them all out the bottom, and this is why they didn't come out earlier. You should not have to drive lifters out. That is a problem. Okay, that's it. We're now down to a bare block. There is basically an oil dipstick tube we could take off, but don't really have to. At least not this second. So that is realistically the end of this video. This was just disassembly and marking. As you may have noticed, I didn't mention this before, but I've got a... actually, I think I did mention this. It's just been a while since I recorded the first part. I've got this 2-liter pop bottle thing that works really good on 4-inch bore motors, which a lot of them are. And everything's marked. Some of this stuff is ready to just be thrown away. But the next section is going to be measuring and deciding what you want to do at the machine shop. So go ahead, hit the like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you later.